All right, so welcome everybody to the Busy Moms Book Club, which is always a lot of fun for me. So hopefully it's fun for you too, because as you know, if you've followed me before, watched any of the others, I get really giddy about books. And this is one that I do believe it lives up to its name, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo. So just real quick, a little bit about me. I'm Laura Johnson. I'm a certified life coach, and I help moms become who they're meant to be while being the moms they want to be. And what I love about this book particular, each month there's a book that really helps us, live up to our purpose and our potential here on this life. And what I love about this book is so often the moms that I coach, they feel held back in their dreams and in their goals because their homes are overwhelming to them. And I saw this for myself many years ago, that my home took more from me than it gave to me. And instead of supporting me in my dreams, it was draining me from my dreams. And that's where this was, when I first read this book many years ago, this really changed the way not only that I thought about my home, but also about my life. And so when she talks about that magic and how the home really changes our lives, it transforms our lives, I know as personal experience, that's what I went through with this. And I'm very grateful that I read it many years ago, and was so excited that I was able to revisit it again this month and get a refresher course on it. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So I always like to start with a game. And the game is, you're in the right place if. So you'll have to go over to the chat box, tell me if any of these resonate with you, or if there's something else that stands out to you about your home that you're feeling right now. So the first one is, you're in the right place if you stomp around your house annoyed at the piles of just junk everywhere. Okay. And there's like a specific kind of walking that I do when I get annoyed about the piles. And that's why I call it the stomping. The right place if you go on a rage cleaning rampage where you kick everybody out of the house for a day and you listen to like heavy metal music. Okay, maybe you don't listen to that. Maybe that's just me. But you have to do like the entire house in one fell swoop. And you're so relieved and exhausted at the end, but within a couple weeks, you feel like you need to go on a rampage again. You're in the right place if you spend more time moving objects around your house than you do actually cleaning your house. I always know when I've gotten to that point of like, I'm spending my time, quote unquote, cleaning when I'm not actually cleaning, I'm just moving objects. If you get really giddy about organizing, but you rarely have time to do it. Yes. So Elise said yes to all of these so far. Yep. Monsi says yes as well. Yeah. And I say all of these by personal experience. That's why it's so easy for me to always come up with a no, you're in the right place if game. So the last one is if you feel overwhelmed and burdened by your house and the stuff in it, and it keeps you from doing what you love and what you feel called to do. And like I mentioned in the beginning, that this is where this book came at a very critical time for me, because I finally realized that I had some really specific things that God was calling me to, but I couldn't move forward on those because my home was so much of a burden on my life, especially being the primary caregiver, the main home manager for our family. I realized that I was being held back. And I really remember a turning point for me where I thought, okay, God would not ask me to do these things knowing I had this burden. And it really felt like an invitation for me to address the burden with God's help to move forward and to be able to do the things I feel called to do. Robin says yes to moving things and yes to buying cool containers, but never getting them filled. Yes. We all love the pretty containers. There's so many pretty containers right now too. But yeah, it's a lot trickier to fill them with the appropriate things. And so she talks about that in here. So what I love about this title, again, it's Marie Kondo. I want to make sure we give her credit. She is Japanese. What I love about this book is that it's a little weird, okay? Weird in a good way. the very first time I read this, it was so out there in any of the ways I had thought about home organization. It was very unique. And she even says that in there in her book, where she kind of talks a little bit about her history, that since she was 5 years old, a very young child, she was intrigued by home organization, by making things tidy and cleaning things up. She uses the word tidy probably in what we would probably call cleaning up or organizing. And so when she starts talking about it, she talks about all of the different things that she did that weren't working for her. She was following the advice to a T, and it just didn't work. She talked about how she tried, if you bring one thing in, then you have to get rid of one thing. She talked about, putting things in a box, and if you don't look at the box for a long time, then you can discard the box. She talked about, moving things to the back of the closet, and if you don't miss it, then it's okay. All of these things I had done. All of these things were things that Marie Kondo had done as well. And so instantly I felt connected to her as she was describing some of these things that she did. And when I really got, down to the meat of things, and we're going to talk about the meat of the book in a second, it's funky, it's weird. And I remember when the book first came out, it was kind of a joke. Like, people joked about it, but it works. And that's the crazy thing, is the things she teaches are unconventional. They're things that she created. So that's the first, we are going to be talking about home organization, but the first thing I want you to take away is that it's okay to be different. It's okay that, whatever you're doing in your life, if it goes against unconventional or goes against the conventional things that people are talking or teaching, that's okay. That means that whatever is coming to you is right for some people. Some people will probably read this book and just completely discard it and never apply anything. For me, that was not the case. I applied all of it, and it worked so well for me. So just remember that, as women, and as we're moving towards the things that we feel called to do, the things God's inviting us to do, sometimes it will look unconventional. She has made millions. She has a show on Netflix now. She is doing something because she was unconventional. And that's what really makes it stick for all of us. So that's the first thing. The first big lesson that I took away from this book was that, permission to be different, permission to listen to what's coming to you, and then teaching other people that same thing and trusting that it will resonate with people. So that's the first lesson. So then the second lesson, I'm going to erase that because we want to use all of this space, is that she has a quote on page 203 of the book where she says, real life begins after putting your house in order. Okay. So real life begins after you put your home in order. Now, this is something that I had taken, and I didn't realize it until I went back and read this, for this book club, was that a critical part that I spend with my clients when I'm helping them figure out what it is they're called to do and moving towards that is addressing their home. And I never put the two together, but this was the first place that I learned that the skills that you learn while putting your home in order are the very skills that will help you either build your business, answer your calling, go back to school, be a better mom, any of those skills. Your real life will begin after you put your home in order because of the person you become while doing it. And that was the second big takeaway from her book that I had, was it wasn't just having a clean house. It was becoming the person that's living with the things they love, and being able to have the space and the energy and the freedom to explore those things because your house is no longer a burden on you. So that's the second big thing that I wanted to mention, overall, arching theme of the book that I took away. So what you're doing today is you are starting a journey to real life. So welcome to your journey. And then I shared a little bit about, my experience on how I really took that to heart, and I put my home in order. And as I was thinking about it, she talks a lot about the rebound effect that oftentimes, and we've all experienced this, especially with children in the home, where you clean something and then, you rebound within, a week, everything's all messed up again. And, always having to go through that rebound effect. And she talks about how her clients never rebound. And that's a really big promise, which is fantastic. And so I started questioning that for myself because, yeah, like I do feel like my house is messier right now than I want it. Life circumstances have been a little different right now. So all of that's going into play with it. But then I really stopped to think about it. And she's right. Like my home, there are things that I can tweak and improve on, but it has never been like it used to. I think about my closet. I think about the way I manage my home. I think about drawers and closets where there is freedom and space. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I remember going into a family member's home, many years ago, and every time you would open a cupboard, things would fall out on you. Like it was so jam-packed that things would like come at you every time you opened any drawer or cabinet. And my home used to be like that, and it has never been like that since. So in that way, like, even though I have small children, even though my family dynamic, I've got some kids with special needs, all of that is still really stressful, but it has never been, my home has never been as big of a burden as it used to be. So when we're talking about this and it actually working in our lives, I'm here to tell you that it can work. That yes, things get out of order in my home, but I have never rebounded to the point that I used to be at. And so I really wanted to mention that because I think it's such a bold claim that she makes. And I kind of questioned it for myself as I sat around looking at some of the piles that need to be addressed right now. But yeah, I am here to tell you that it does actually work. Okay, so the first thing, like very first page, which I appreciate that she does, is, in a lot of books, they'll start the first couple chapters talking about their experience and why they're the expert. No, she very first page gets down to it. She's like, here's what you're going to do. You're going to discard things. And then the second step is you're going to organize. Okay, that's it. It's really that simple. Like if you were to only read the first page, that's what you get out of it. And she's right. Like that's what you're going to do. And she says, when you do these things, this is where your entire life will change. Okay, so this is the basic gist of the entire book, is you discard things and then you organize things. And she goes into more details, which we're going to as well. But I want you to really see how simple our problems with our home can be if we simply discard and then organize. Now, when I'm looking at things with my clients, for example, the discard things, well, typically these are switched, okay? So most of us will want to start organizing first. We'll buy the cool, just like Robin mentioned, we'll buy the cool stuff. We're going to put it in pretty containers. We're going to make it look really nice. And then somebody's going to come in and they're going to need one thing in the bottom container of the 5 that are stacked, take it all down, explode that container, and probably leave it. Like, if we're being honest, that's what happens. And so the organized part really gets messed up really fast. And so when she's talking about the simplicity of this, she's talking about systems to discard. And what's so important about this is that not only is this a life lesson for our things, this can be a life lesson for our activities in our home. This can be a life lesson for people that we spend our time with. Like really coming down to it, we have to find and understand, what do we want to keep in our life, and then let go of everything else. So when we look at this first step and what she goes into. Well, before we do that, there's one other thing. She talks about how she also recommends to do these 2 steps to do it quick. She said, if you're going to do, discard one thing a day, or if you're going to only do one room at a time, you'll be working in your house forever and you don't ever get anywhere. She recommends doing it quick. Now, when I first read this, even this time as I was refreshing on it and going back through, I kind of got some anxiety thinking about it. I'm like, well, I'm still caring for a family. I can't do it quick. What do I do? Like kick them out of the house for a week and do it quick? Or, like I could feel the anxiety. But then she gets to a point where she's like, okay, what does quick mean? And she says 6 months. You're like, oh my gosh. Like, oh, that gives us so much permission. Like, oh, okay, good. This is not the only thing that's going to consume our lives. That when you're doing something, you can do it for a 6-month time period. And at first, that feels like a long time. But what we're doing in this process and why she calls, 6 months quick is that you are deprogramming the way you've existed for decades of years, and it only takes 6 months. When you look at it that way, you're like, wow, that is pretty fast. And it gives you permission to take some time on it too. And so that's the other thing that I wanted to mention, in the beginning, before we dive into these 2 things, is she said the entire process can't be done unless you change the way you think. And as a mindset coach, and we focus on a lot of application, but mindset is always the first part that you look at when you're changing habits. She is so clear on this, and why it takes 6 months is because you are reprogramming your brain. That is a really hard thing to do when you have spent decades thinking about it in a certain way. And she said, as you're going through this and as you're addressing things, you are also addressing the way you believe, like the things you believe about yourself. That's the part that is the hardest thing to do. It's not the discarding of things. It's questioning your identity in the process and allowing the negative emotions to come up as you go through this process. And so she said, as you do this, you start becoming, not only is your home becoming more in order, but you're also getting a full life reset because you're becoming a different person in the process. So you can go over to the chat box. Tell me if you have any questions about that. I know so far it may seem kind of vague. We're going to go into more details in just a second, but I want to make sure if we have questions, we get those answered. Okay, so I'll give you a second to type if you need to, but I'm going to erase this. We're going to go back to, that first step. Okay, so she starts to outline her process for discarding. Okay, I don't see any questions, so we're going to keep moving, but if you are still typing, that's okay. I promise I'll come back to the question. So the very first thing that she talks about is to start the process of discarding by first visualize. Visualize your home and your life that you want. Okay, so I actually want to give you guys just a second to do this, maybe 15, 30 seconds to do this. So if you have a pen and paper, you can write it down. If not, if you're in a spot where you can just, think about it, you can do that as well. How do you want your home to, how do you want to experience your home? Do you want it to be different than it is right now? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What are places that you've walked into where you just feel different when you go in there? So I want you just to take a second and as you visualize and just have you visualize that. So as you're doing that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about like when I visualize, like what comes up for me. So for me, there is a very distinct difference when I walk into an Airbnb. I know that seems very silly, but there, in my mind, there's not a lot of noise, like mental noise in an Airbnb. Typically, they're very simple. They're not cluttered. Oftentimes they will have some kind of smell, like a nice refreshing smell that's in there. It's not like a fruity or a flowery, it's just refreshing. It feels different to me than a hotel. Hotels almost have a little stuffy vibe to them. An Airbnb just feels very light. So when I visualize my home and the way I want it to look and the way I want to experience it, excuse me, is I want it to be very light, and I want it to be airy, and I want it to have pretty art that speaks to me. I want it to have pictures of the people I love. These are the things that really stand out to me when I think about my home. There's also space in closets. I know that seems very strange, but I like closets. Let's see if I can spell. There we go. I like being able to have, like, go into a closet and have space to move. Even if there's things in there, it's not coming out at me. Like I mentioned, the family member. It's just, I can breathe. That's really like what it boils down to me, is that I like being able to move and to breathe. So you can go over to the comments. Tell me what came up for you as you started visualizing. What does that space look like? What does your home look like? Same thing with my life, is I like to have space to move and exist. I don't like being overly scheduled. That's very challenging to me when I have a very scheduled one after another week or month. And I know those for me are temporary now. It used to be back to back, month after month after month, and it just got to be too much. That didn't resonate with me. That might resonate with somebody else, and that's okay. So you can go over to the comments. Tell me what you visualize. So the example that Marie Kondo uses in the book is, she talked about going into a client's home, which was filled with like cabinets of storage. And for her, what she visualized was something very feminine. She wanted things to feel feminine and to feel like she wanted, I think it was like a pretty lamp and like a pink rug, or, something like that, and she said it was so far from feminine that it was important for her to do this visualization with her, because she never would have known that had she not first had her client visualize it. Okay, so not a lot of stuff is the least, not a lot of stuff, having a place for everything, clean countertops, candles, and soft lighting. Yes, which yes, all of that. I was thinking about B&B or after a home makeover show. Yes, where there's always that moment where you're like, where they walk into the room and their eyes light up and everything looks beautiful and put together. And so that might be something like, now, once you visualize it, ask yourself why you want those things. For me, I like being able to have that space to breathe, because if I visually see a space, then mentally I have space to think. And so for me, that's why it was really important. Let's see, less furniture, more open, softer lighting with lamps. Yes, which is so good that you guys are recognizing it, because for me, it has to be like really bright lights because I go crazy. It's not crazy. It's just, what I prefer and who I am. But yes, I always have like the really, really bright lights. I look like Clark Griswold's house on Christmas. Like all the other houses, their lights are like soft, and then there's ours, it's like glowing. Auntie says I like bright too. Yeah, so it really is just preference, as we're visualizing it. So it's so important to know these things and why we want these things. And so she invites us to do that in the book. Like, once you start once you start visualizing, ask yourself why you want that. And then ask yourself again, well, okay, well, why do you want that? And she said, what it will always boil down to is it's the thing that brings you happiness. What we're looking for through this process of discarding is we are looking for happiness and for joy. So that's the first step, visualize your home and your life. The second step is to question, does it spark joy? Now, this is what Marie Kondo is most famous for. She calls this her Konmari Method, where as you go through the book and you read it, it makes sense. So I'm going to explain it from a very Western perspective. You know, it's very different because this is very much part of just who she is. And I find that as I've taken this to heart and I include this in my Come Alive list, if you've attended that workshop of Discover Your Calling, you know, what we're looking for is, does it spark joy? This has become almost like a mantra for my life, and how I'm able to have a very intentional life is I'm looking at, does it spark joy? And I learned this because of this book and because I've applied it to my home. And so when she's talking about discarding things in this process, is she invites us to first look at categories. So the first category is clothes. Well, I'm actually going to write all of them out. Clothes, books, it's kimono, which is like miscellaneous stuff, and then mementos. And within each of these, she has subcategories. Like with clothes, she breaks it down into doing off-season, like sweaters, coats first, and moving through those. So if you want more information about the subcategories, you can look in the book for those. We're not going to dive into the subcategories. But what she recommends is not doing a room at a time, but doing a category at a time. One of the examples she uses, oftentimes people will store things in multiple locations within the house, and they don't realize how much they have until they bring it all together. She said an example of this is somebody had like 20,000 cotton swabs. Even if you use one cotton swab a day, I mean, it would take you so many years in order to do it. So she said, sometimes bringing everything together, you're able to see the amount of things that you do have. So what she does with her clients is she invites them to take all clothing in all locations of the house and to put it into a pile on the floor, one pile. And when you do that, you start to see the amount. She said that she'll always get to a point where she'll ask them, okay, is there anything else? No, I think it's all of it. She said, okay, because if we find anything else in the house, then it automatically goes in the discard pile. And she said, it's so interesting how people really have, when that pressure is on, they start to remember like how they've categorized things in the brain. They say, oh yeah, I have this in my husband's closet, or I have this coat in this closet. Okay, go get those and bring those. And as you're going through all of the clothes, the first time my husband and I did this, it was obscene. We had so much stuff, like horrendous amounts of stuff that we were not that old. We did not have much money. How did we have this much stuff? It was ridiculous. And as we started going through this, it was a comical process, because what she recommends is that you take each item and you hold it and you feel it, and you will know very intuitively if it sparks joy in you from the second you pick up that item. She said there's two ways to think about this. She says you can follow your intuition or you can think about it rationally. And most of us want to rationally think about things when we're looking at discarding them. But what we miss is whether or not it sparks joy. So we start to fill our home with items that we rationally think we should have, but don't actually bring us joy and happiness. And then we start getting the cluttered on top of it, because we're not living from a joyful place. So when we're looking at our clothes and we're holding an item up, she said, you'll know very quickly, does it spark joy? And if it doesn't, you thank the item and discard it. And you will be amazed at how quickly you can go through this process when this joy is your only, it is your only criteria. And you'll feel when your brain wants to think, okay, well, I've only worn this once and I've spent this amount of money on it. And she talks about that in the book, how you'll start to see your rational come up when you're trying to hold this joy. And you want to be very onto it. So again, this whole process is becoming somebody that lives a happy, joyful life, not just thinking rationally about everything. And so when you're going through clothes, for example, she recommends you go through clothes first because you learn this process in a simple manner. Most of us know clothes that don't bring us joy, but maybe we wear them anyway. And she said, one of the instinctive fears that most people have is, I'm not going to have any clothes by the end of this. I'm not going to be able to wear anything. And you will be amazed at how quickly you find the things that you love, and they're already the things you're wearing, and the rest of the stuff is just cluttering your closet. I'm always amazed. I'm like, even going through this book, I immediately thought, oh, I've got this shirt in my closet that the only reason why I'm keeping is because somebody I admired commented that she thought it was a cute shirt. Honestly, haven't worn the shirt in at least 3 years, but the last time I wore it, this person I really admired commented on how cute it was. And so I've kept the shirt. Like, it makes no sense. It's not bringing me joy right now. It's just that I have that connection to it, but I can love that connection and be okay to let the shirt go. So that's where she recommends is starting with clothes, because you start gaining confidence and momentum to start moving through categories that are harder. She said that most people will start with mementos, or they'll get to a point where maybe there is something in one of these other categories that could be considered a memento. Should, put it aside and put it in the mementos. Because when you get to that, you have been building your, we'll call it your joy skill. I've just made that up. She doesn't say that in the book, but you've been building that skill of determining joy. So by the time you get here, you're already really clear and listening and trusting yourself through that process. So I want you to go over, if you've ever done this before with your clothes or anything else in your house. Tell us your experience on this, because it is very strange at first, but it becomes so much easier as you go. The other thing that she talks about as you go through this process of does it spark joy is again, I call it weird. I think it's very cool. It's the way she lives and exists in the world, where everything has an energy and existence about it. So when you're holding an item and you're thanking it, you are transferring your love and your energy and allowing that thing to move on in its journey to wherever it's going to go. And it's very cool to think about that energy movement. This will come into play when you're thinking about mementos, and especially because some of those mementos are gifts that people have given to us. And I love what she said at this part in the book, where she talks about how a present isn't a thing, it's a medium in which we feel someone's love. And we can accept and appreciate that love and feel that love without having to keep the thing that they gave to us. So that was really important for me when I was looking at that. To tell you just a little bit of background, my amazing mother-in-law, she is fantastic. We have a great relationship now. It didn't always used to be that way. She gave us lots of things to the point where I felt like I was drowning in the amount of things that she gave us. And I felt like I couldn't get rid of any of those things. One, because she would ask about them sometimes, and two, because she would look for them. So it became very, a very frustrating thing for me, early on in our marriage and when my kids were younger. And but what I found was that what she was trying to do was transfer love and show her love. And I was then able to start accepting the love without keeping the item. And eventually she picked up on that and she stopped giving things. I remember once I started returning a lot of clothes that she would give us, and I would keep the gift cards and buy like baby shower gifts, the gift cards, because it was no 2-year-old needs 40 t-shirts. Like, it was obscene amounts of things. And she found those gift cards. And I remember feeling so embarrassed and feeling those negative emotions that, oh my gosh, she found it. But it was such a gift where I really just stayed back to like, it was the most loving thing for me to do, not to hold on to the resentment with the amount of stuff, but that I could accept the love and then choose how I want to proceed forward with the items that were the means of which she was showing us love. I got to decide what to do with those things. So that's where, as you move into the mementos, you want to be building those skills so you can start transferring and understanding the way you exist, with those mementos and being able to love and appreciate those things. The other thing she also mentions in the mementos is that in order to work through the mementos, you have to be okay processing the past or your fear of the future. And I appreciated that she said that, because there are things that I have held on to because of the person I used to be. And I felt I needed to keep those things as a remembrance of that person, when in reality, I don't want to remember that person. That's just not who I am. And when I looked at those things, it didn't spark joy. It was actually a twinge of sadness and heartache for the person that I used to be during those years. And I could process that sadness and be grateful for the lessons I learned during that time and the path that God took me on, and let those things go. And it was very, going back to the way I visualized my home, it was very freeing and much lighter when I could let some of those things go. And I do, for me personally, she talks about, discarding most things. For me personally, I do keep a box of the mementos that do bring me joy. There's very few things that I do hold on to, but there are some. There was one other thing that I was just about to say with that. Sorry, my phone is buzzing. Okay, yeah. So go over to, I think that's all as far as that. That really is the basics of the book. There's not much. In the middle, you'll start recognizing, she'll break down like what you do with papers. There is one thing that I do want to mention that I appreciated that she said in the miscellaneous, is she says you kind of go in with the mindset with papers, and I would also say emails, texts. She said you go in with the thought of discard everything. And I like this. And then, so what I do now, and I'll just say how I applied this in one specific area, is with my emails. I hate cleaning up emails. It's like, oh, I don't like emails. So I have my work account, my personal account, and then I have an account just for like subscriptions where they are only businesses that I love, that I regularly shop at, that I like to see their sales. Like Land's End always has amazing kids swimsuits, but I will never pay full price for their swimsuits. I only shop their sales. So that's an example where I have a separate email account just for subscriptions. But what I love about this is when you go in with the mindset of discard everything, when I'm cleaning my email, which I try and do about once a month, I just do it like a full-on clean, is at the very top of I use Gmail of Google, it says select all. And I select everything with the thought I'm going to discard everything. And then I'll go through and unclick a few things that I need to keep to address. Very different than when I used to have 700 emails and I'd go and look at every single one and click it if I'm going to discard it. Now I go in with the mindset of delete it all and unclick the things that I need to address. I can go through my email very quickly. Yeah. So Anzi says, I hate reading emails, but I love deleting them. Yes. It's like this instant high that we can get. But it used to be so stressful for me. It's not anymore, because I go in with this mindset of discard everything. And so that's where Marie Kondo really helps with that on like, does it spark joy? If not, go in with that mindset of discard everything. So come over to the comments. Tell me, let's see, I do love getting rid of clothes. Yes, getting rid of clothes, honestly, is always wonderful. So go over to the chat box. I just wanted to see if there was anything else. Yeah, so she breaks each of those categories down. If you're ready to do this, definitely go through the book and really see her mindset as she goes through them. So then here's the last thing that I will leave with, and then we'll leave a little bit of time for coaching if anybody wants coaching. She says, as you reduce your belongings through the process of tidying, you will come to a point where you suddenly know how much is just right for you. And what I like about this particular thing is that we go in oftentimes with this fear that we'll have nothing left. And when we go in with that fear, we're blocking our joy. And when we're blocking our joy, we have a harder time going through the process. What I like about what she says right here is that this is the process of learning to trust yourself, of learning to trust your intuition. So that's the next part she says is follow your intuition and all will be well. And then she'll go on, and we'll end with this. She says, believe what your heart tells you when you ask, does this spark joy? If you act on that intuition, you will be amazed at how things will begin to connect in your life and at the dramatic changes that follow. It is as if your life has been touched by magic. Putting your house in order is the magic that creates a vibrant and happy life. And that to me is really beautiful, because many times when I do go to, quote unquote, clean or to organize, it is from this pressure, from this desperation. It's from this place of it has to be done so I can feel better. What I love about her mindset with all of this is as we're becoming that person that listens, that develops that self-trust, that moves through our home by following our intuition, we do create this magical, vibrant, happy life that we are surrounded by things that we truly do love. And that's where we want to be with our home. And that's how our home starts to support us in our dreams, because it's not a weight around our ankles. In fact, it's buoying us up for the rest of our lives to do the things that we feel called to do. So this is where this book really is a very impactful, powerful book. If you want to take away anything from it without reading all of those categories and what she recommends, is go at it from, I'm going to work on my mindset. I'm going to work on discarding everything first through the filter of, does this spark joy? Then at that point is when you start organizing, and it becomes so simple to organize things. And she honestly doesn't spend a lot of time talking about the organization in the book, because there's so much less that you have to organize. And then I guess last thing, she does go into detail in the book on how to fold clothes. If you're ever wanting to look at it, I would recommend just Googling how to fold your clothes like Marie Kondo, or, whatever, find a video on YouTube, because reading about it is very hard. I remember a long time ago, like, okay, what now? And my husband were like trying to follow along the instructions in the book with our shirts. But I will say that, when you're folding things in the right way, the Marie Kondo way, she calls it Konmari. When you're, that's her last name, first name put together, Konmari. When you're folding it in the Konmari way, storage is very simple. And I've never had a problem with storage since. Never ran out of room in my drawers, never ran out of room in storage containers, any of that, as long as I'm folding it in the KonMari. I only do that for my stuff, just to be clear. I don't have time to do that with my kids' stuff. Plus they mess up their drawers. So when they get old enough, if they choose to do it in that manner because it sparks joy for them, I will happily teach them that. For me, I don't do that because that's just a priority that I have. So go over, share anything that really stood out to you, any takeaways that you have from this. I would love to hear your thoughts. And I did want to leave, the 10 minutes at the end so that we can do any coaching. So if there's something that's been on your mind, whether it's with this book or something else, just let me know. And I can either unmute you or you can just go over to the comments and just ask the question there. So I'm just gonna be quiet for a second, give you a chance to think. Okay, and then as you're hopefully doing that, I'm going to find really quick and tell you what the book is for next month, because right off the top of my head, I can't remember. That is my brain. So hold on really quick. If you've asked a question, that's okay. I'll come right back to it, I promise. Okay. I am, let's see. Okay, I'm just finding the book for next month. Okay, so next month is Untamed. So I'll tell you about that in just a second. Okay, so Robin says, I come from a parent that doesn't keep anything, so I find it very hard to let go of things. I think that's such a good point. So Robin, I want you to really think about for yourself, are they things that you want to hold on to? And you can answer this in the comments. Are they things you want to hold on to? Or is it things that you're afraid to, or you're uncomfortable letting go of because there's this feeling from growing up? So you can go over to the comments. Okay, honestly, I'll answer your question in just a second. Okay, so I think we'll give Robin a chance. Both. Some are things I feel I can't replace. Okay, so that's a really good point. Okay. So when we're looking at, we're just going to say this is circumstances. So this is the model that I use when I coach my clients, is we always start with the circumstances. We're going to say items in home. Okay. Anytime I'm coaching myself about the stuff in my house, I found that stuff was very triggering emotionally for me. So I always come back to just items in my home. It feels very neutral. And then the thought you have, I can't let go of it. So Robin, I want you to think for yourself, when you say I can't let go of it, what's the feeling that comes up for you? So anytime we have a thought is a sentence our brain has created that it stores in its mind. And then we start gathering evidence to prove this thought. So thoughts will create some kind of feeling within our body. These feelings can be a whole range of things, and sometimes we can't even tell what the feeling is. Sometimes it's like a pit in my stomach, like that's the feeling. Or there's some kind of, tightness inside of us, like it might just be a tightness. And so Robin, you can figure that out for yourself. What's the feeling? And then how do you act when you start feeling whatever it is? These are the actions or the inactions that we start doing. So I'm going to wait just a second and see if Robin's able to respond to the feelings, and then you can start thinking about what are some of the actions. So as she's typing, I'll just tell you a little bit for me. Like, I know when I say I can't let go of things, I have a hard time figuring out what the feeling is, but I immediately go into like a tenseness, like I can't let go, like I have to hold on to it. I might not ever be able to replace it. What will happen? And it's almost like this fear starts to grip me. Now that's a feeling for me. That may not be Robin's feeling. She said, someone worked really hard to obtain this, and getting rid of it brings guilt. Such an important distinction. Okay, so you feel guilt. So what do you do when you start feeling guilt? So sometimes people will start to shut down. They'll start to distract themselves from the guilt. They'll start, instead of looking at that thing, they might, start moving around that thing and moving other stuff. And again, these are just examples. Robin, I want you to think about this for yourself is, what do you do when you bring guilt, or when you feel guilt, excuse me. So most of the time, there's going to be some kind of action that we do from a place of guilt that isn't necessarily the action we want to do. Or it might be that we're doing it from a very obligatory place, if that makes sense. And sometimes that can have a little tinge of resentment in it. Again, same thing with my mother-in-law, where I couldn't get rid of things. I felt very guilty about getting rid of things because she gave them, she spent money on them, she spent her time on each of these things. Sometimes they were homemade quilts, and lots of homemade quilts. And so I started having actions, but what I found was that there was also a bit of resentment in there. It was kind of buried, and it took me some time to bring that to the surface. And so for me, when I was feeling guilt, is I would hide stuff away. I would get really stressed when she came to visit, because I would start bringing out all the items, pretending we had been using them. Like it became such a stressful experience for me to keep these things because I couldn't let go of them. So for me, I'm bringing all the items out. So for me, the result of this is I couldn't let go of my guilt. So instead of enjoying time with my mother-in-law, I spent time feeling guilty and resentful. This may not be the rest for you, Robin, but I'm using this as an example that spend time looking at what's the result that it's creating for you when you have the thought, I can't let go of it. Because once you start breaking this down, you'll start to see that oftentimes that guilt that we're carrying is going to spill over into other areas of our lives. This was negatively affecting my relationship with her. So for me, the most loving thing that I could do for our relationship was to let go of things. That's not to say I let go of everything, but I started finding the things that I truly loved and that really meant a lot to my family and me, instead of the things that maybe she, stress bought us and then I was carrying that I felt like I needed to hold on to. But again, this was the rest of, this is an example for me. It may not look this way for you. So I want you to get really clear on the rest of it for you, because it's going to show you a lot of insights into your home and whether or not you want to live in your home from a place of guilt, or if you want to find some other thoughts. Maybe you want to hold on to these things, and that's okay. You are more than happy to. Everybody's more than welcome to hold on to those things if they're bringing you happiness. But this is that part where she talks about you really are becoming a different person through this process, and you're processing your past self in the process of it. That was a lot of process. But yes, all of us have some kind of experience from growing up that we have to process. And this just may be how it's showing up for you. Now you get to work on it. It's showing you your next step of growth. So hopefully that was helpful for you. Please, go back over there, ask any questions. So in this last minute, is it possible to spark joy even if it's been packed away for so long? Yeah, definitely. Something can for sure spark joy what she would recommend, you know, what I believe she would recommend is if it really sparks joy, find a place for it in your home. Bring it out of its packaging. You know, maybe it's a baby blessing, you know, outfit that maybe you want to frame, you know, hang it somewhere where you're able to see it and allow it to spark that joy for you. That's where I would guess that she would recommend. Um, there's a part where she talks about socks. It's really comical. And again, it's just a different way of thinking from me, where she talks about socks don't want to be bunched up and they don't want to be, you know, what, I can't remember the exact words, you know, balled up. She says, don't ever ball socks up. They can't breathe. They can't fully rest in that spot. It just makes me funny to think about my socks resting. I think it's really cute. And that's, you know, that's her being herself and really, you know, showing up as who she is. And it's kind of endearing. So it's okay for us to be a little bit different. It can be very endearing to people. Anyway, with the sock, she talks about, you know, being able to give them space to breathe, a space to exist, a space to rest. And so that's why, you know, if something is packed up and it's been there for a long time, it's not getting the light and the life that it deserves, especially if it's something that's bringing you joy. So she would recommend, that's my guess, is she would recommend find a place for it so you can bring it to life and to give it light again. Robin, very helpful. I'm thinking of putting everything in a very small area display and purging the rest. Oh, that's such a good point. Thank you for mentioning that, Robin. She talks about how the top shelves of your bookcases can become your personal shrines. And I love that thought on, like, yes, like there are things that you want to keep, the things that do bring you joy, and you can let go of all of the other stuff and trust that the love that was behind whatever gift or thing that was given to you has been passed on. You have received it. You no longer need the physical item any longer, but the things you do love, make a place for them, bring them to life, just as I was telling Ansi, put them in a special place. There's certain things that we love to, like, I've got my collar from my dogs that have passed away. Like, those mean a lot to me. They're very special. Based on what she says in the book, we could probably get rid of those, but those are joyful moments that I keep them in a special place, and where, the kids and I will take them down and we'll talk about all of the memories, and it becomes such a beautiful bonding experience for us. So that's just an example of something that, we try and keep and use that joy on a regular basis for something that probably wouldn't mean anything else to anybody else. So hopefully that was helpful. So we are doing Untamed next month. I love this book. I will tell you that it is a Christian woman who does come out, and it's her journey falling in love with a woman. So I did want to mention that if you're unfamiliar with Glennon Doyle, and if that's a book that you're not comfortable with, that's okay. What we're going to do, and yeah, Ansi said, yeah, you stopped reading it for that reason. Yes, and I totally respect that. If you're uncomfortable joining the book club, that's okay. I will speak about it in a very respectful way. What I like about this book is there's a lot of lessons as women that we can take away from it, where there is an awakening that we each go through. I'm not recommending that you leave your spouse, especially for a woman. Okay. That's a personal journey. If you feel like you're on that, definitely that's not the conversation that we are going to be having in book club. So I wanted to be very clear on that the lessons that we are going to be talking about is awakening who we are and understanding our knowing, and how that connects to divinity and to God. So that's where we will be talking. That's, the basis that we're going to be talking about. So if you have any discomfort with that, of course, reach out to me. And I will make sure that we're very respectful as we talk about it. So, I've wanted to read that book. Yeah, I truly do. I do love it. And, there's a lot of lessons that I learned from it. And, for me, that's always what I'm doing in books, is I'm pulling the lessons out that speak to me, that help me understand my relationship with God, as well as my relationship in the world all around. So Untamed has been recommended on my list. All right, perfect. Well, we're going to have a fun time this next month. So thank you all for coming. It was so good to see you, and I will see you next month.